Good evening and welcome. For those of you who haven't been here before, I'd like to begin by telling you that this is the third year for a series of community talks that are jointly sponsored by Emeriti professors in Columbia University School of Professional Studies, for which George Calderaro is the community impact person, and the Morningside Retirement and Health Services program. So we're a 3-agency organization. And we're happy to be here, and we're happy to see you here. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Professor Walter Frisch, who is going to talk to us today about a story that he calls the biography of the song. Professor Frisch joined the Columbia University Music Department in 1982, shortly after he finished his PhD at Berkeley. He has an endowed chair in the music department at Columbia, signaling that he is a prolific writer and has been invited to teach at many universities in addition to Columbia, and also has awards from prestigious organizations. He is considered an historical musicologist, and he is a celebrated person. He and I will change places in just a minute, but first I would like to read a very, very, very brief comment from one of the reviewers of the book on which this talk is based. The reviewer said, and as I say, I quote, "Walter Frisch is that rare thing, a meticulous researcher who also writes wonderfully readable books." And I will paraphrase another comment from this same reviewer who said, regardless of how much you know about this song, or the book, or the movie, or the star, or the composer, or the lyricist, you will find something new and interesting about the knowledge that you already have. So it is once again with pleasure that I change places with Professor Frisch.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm keeping my phone out, not because I'm reading my email or text messages, because I have like a miniature version of the PowerPoint so I can see what's coming next. But I won't try not to look at it too much. So thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, my talk is based on, or materials related to, a book I wrote on a small study of the song Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz. And I came to it partly or largely through my love, particularly of the composer who wrote the song, Harold Arlen, and whose songs are sometimes better known than his name. I sometimes say that he has anonymous immortality because I mention to somebody that I'm working on Harold Arlen, and they stare at me blankly, and then I say, "Over the Rainbow." Can you hear better now?
A little more volume.
A little more. Okay, let me. More volume. Oh. So I say that I'm working on the music of Harold Arlen, and they stare at me blankly, and I say, "Over the Rainbow," and they say, "Oh, he wrote that?" And I say, "Stormy Weather," and they say, "Oh, he wrote that?" Accentuate the positive, Blues in the Night, and it goes on and on, the great hits of the American songbook that he wrote, but somehow his name isn't often as well known as Irving Berlin or George Gershwin, but he's right up there with them as in terms of the quality of his output. So, but I figured I would like to write a larger book about Harold Arlen songs, but I figured begin with the song that everybody does know and the story behind it. So that's where I begin here.
Walter, could
Yeah.
you move to the left a little bit because the camera can't see you?
All right.
And then, yeah, if you could speak into the mic because we
All right,
Hear
how
every
is
word.
this? We're having,
Matt,
I will-
how's that?
is that better? I will speak, can you hear me now? Okay,
Great.
you can hear me. All right, so Over the Rainbow, I'm going to just talk a bit about that.
Turn it a little louder.
Even louder, okay. As many of you know, most of you know, it's the most famous song from probably the most famous movie musical ever created, The Wizard of Oz, which came out in 1939. And this is one of the original posters from The Wizard of Oz with the famous cast, Judy Garland. I just forgot it's Frank Morgan, Ray Bolger, Burt Lahr, and Jack Haley. And as you also undoubtedly know, the movie was based on the original book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, which had come out around 1900, and which had actually had a number of musical adaptations before this. Plays and even some early films. But Hollywood was really going in a big way for this, to make a movie of this,
Speaker on top of a platform.
to make a movie musical based on this. And actually, this was the MGM Studios, and they wanted to be or they saw themselves as being in competition with another studio that had produced Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Disney, in 1937 or so, and they wanted to top that with The Wizard of Oz. And so that's sort of where the idea came from, to make a movie based on this. And I think in many ways, of course, a live action film as opposed to an animated film, but that was the competition. And in fact, some of the idea for Over the Rainbow came from the associate producer, Arthur Freed, wanted a song that could sort of stand up against Someday My Prince Will Come from the Snow White. And so a ballad that could even top that one. So the film, The Wizard of Oz, has become such a part of culture in so many dimensions that you can point to many aspects of our society that have drawn on, or you can make connections with the film. You remember the famous skywriting that the witch puts up, "Surrender, Dorothy." Well, not too long ago, the designer Marc Jacobs created a lipstick, a very red lipstick, which he called "Surrender, Dorothy."
Should go with the red shoes.
Yeah, go with the red shoes for sure. Oops. Let's see. And it's not Ruby. And this computer, and some computers it doesn't always work, but the title here, Getting Over the Rainbow, I had used a font for that, which actually, in certain versions, looks like this. There's an actual Google font called Over the Rainbow, which, so if you see, sometimes when I presented this, if the computer doesn't have the font, and the designer of the font said, "This font always makes me smile. Something about the style of the handwriting just makes me happy. It is slightly," what does that say? Connected, thank you. But not, sorry, I'm reading from the side. But not a true script by any means, and so on. So there it is, a Google font called Over the Rainbow. Now, one of the things when I talked about the anonymous immortality of Arlen, it also sort of applies to Harburg in terms of this song. In the year 2000, there was a survey sent around to educators and journalists and various people, asking them to name the greatest song of the 20th century. The National Endowment for the Arts, the Recording Industry Association of America, what is the song of the century, number one. And Over the Rainbow came in as the top song of the century in this survey. And in reports about this in the year 2000, very often you wouldn't get the composer or the lyricist, you'd get Judy Garland, and you'd get the name of the film and the name of the song, But the composer, Yip Harburg, Harold Arlen, and the lyricist, Yip Harburg, didn't often get mentioned. And here they are, Yip Harburg on the left, or E.Y. Harburg, and Harold Arlen, who had a very long and fruitful partnership. Arlen worked with a number of different lyricists. Yip Harburg was one of the most prominent. They got together first in the mid-1930s. They worked on a couple of musicals together. They worked on some films together, including...
Finian's Rainbow.
No, that was actually Harburg and Burton Lane later. But the film, the Groucho Marx film, they wrote Lydia the Tattooed Lady for that one, Night at the Circus, I guess is it, and other shows and films. And when Arthur Freed, who was the executive producer of the film The Wizard of Oz, working for Louis B. Mayer and Mervyn LeRoy, the main producer, was looking for a composer and lyricist to write the score for this film. He very much was interested in Arlen and Harburg, even though they were still relatively young and not that well known in Hollywood, and even not that well known on Broadway in some ways. But Arthur Freed very much liked some songs from the show Hooray for What, which is a show that Arlen and Harburg had written in Broadway, very leftist show, like Harburg's Politics often were. It was not a great success, Hooray for What, from the mid to late 1930s, but there was a song that Arthur Freed thought had a certain lilt and a certain quality that he wanted to have in the music for The Wizard of Oz. So he approached them, and they were as surprised as anybody that they got selected. And shortly after they got selected in 1938 and accepted the commission, Arlen met up with Jerome Kern, who was super famous, of course, a venerated composer of Hollywood and Broadway. And Arlen said, well, I've just gotten the commission to write The Wizard of Oz. And Jerome Kern said, you got it? He was a bit envious, I think, Jerome Kern. But that's how it happened. And so they had like 4 weeks or 6 weeks to write the songs in the spring of 1938 while the film was in production. And, oh wait, I didn't stop it for a second there. They wrote quite quickly what Arlen called the lemon drop songs for the film, which are, you know, the sort of happier songs, We're Off to Meet the Wizard, and songs like that. The Munchkin songs and Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, thank you. But they were really struggling over what to do because there was always going to be a Kansas song for Dorothy, a song that she would sing in Kansas. And at first it was a more lighthearted number. There were several possibilities for that. And what they eventually came to, of course, was this song. And it took them quite a while to come to it. And let me just, it's a famous scene, but let me just play it for you before I talk a little more about it, what eventually happened.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow.
So familiar and so perfect in a way that it's hard to believe how long it took them to get to this particular formulation, this particular mood, this particular emotion for Dorothy. Because what the song seems to express, as many of you know, is a sense of wanting to get away from a situation that is oppressive, finding greater happiness, greater security over the rainbow somewhere else. But it was sort of in conflict with the theme that was developing in the film from the scriptwriters and the producers of the idea of home sweet home, that Kansas is home, that you don't want to leave home, that home is where you want to return to. And this is an idea that is still in the film very much. And in the final scene, one of the final scenes, you can hear how that happens and then Dorothy's desire to return home. And you can also hear in it a song, an earlier song, not from the film, or not written for the film, an earlier tune that is worked into the soundtrack. And it's the song, There's No Place Like Home. Let's see if we can get to.
Are you ready now?
Yes. Say goodbye, Toto. Yes, I'm ready now.
Then close your eyes and tap your heels together 3 times. And think to yourself, there's no place like home. There's no place like home.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
So you heard that song, in the violin melody you heard, it's an old tune actually from the 19th century, written by Henry Bishop. Mid pleasures and palaces, though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. Very familiar tune from the earlier part of the 19th century that became one of the most popular songs printed throughout the 19th century, later recorded. And this was something that the producers of Wizard of Oz were really trying to reinforce, this idea of home sweet home. And very early, before Arlen and Harburg were signed to the film, a staff composer at MGM and a very prominent and fine musician, Roger Edens, who was actually also Judy Garland's coach and mentor in many ways, was drafting music and lyrics for the movie. This was March or April, and Arlen and Harburg were signed at the end of May 1938 for the film. And he wrote a draft for Dorothy's quote-unquote Kansas song, and you could see we don't have the music for it, or there's music for another version of it. Mid pleasures and palaces, in London, Paris, and Rome, there's no place quite like Kansas, and my little Kansas home sweet home. And that's very much, obviously, a reference to the original lyrics that we just saw, mid pleasures and palaces, though. So that was a theme that was really being reinforced. And so how do you, I mean, that's a very different sentiment for Dorothy to be singing in Kansas, right, than Over the Rainbow. So how did we get from one to the other? Well, it's interesting that this has been discussed quite a bit, most interestingly, or in part, by the author Salman Rushdie, who wrote a wonderful little book on the film The Wizard of Oz in a British Film Institute classic series. And he really tackles this question of home versus away, and just read this quote for him. Anyone who has swallowed the scriptwriter's notion that this is a film about the superiority of home over away, that the moral of The Wizard of Oz is as sickly sweet as an embroidered sampler, east-west, home is best, would do well to listen to the yearning in Judy Garland's voice as her face tilts upward towards the skies. What she expresses here, what she embodies with the purity of an archetype, is the human dream of leaving, a dream at least as powerful as its countervailing dream of roots. Over the Rainbow is, or ought to be, the anthem of all the world's migrants, all those who go in search of the place where, quote, the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. It is a celebration of escape, a grand paean to the uprooted self, a hymn to elsewhere, which is a very interesting way of... Now, at the time that he wrote this book, in the early 90s, Rushdie was under the fatwa. He was in exile, in hiding himself. He was away from home in more ways than one. So this idea of escape and an uprooted self was very important to him. But it also says something important about the film that is maybe not that often stressed. And it's interesting that Harburg, the lyricist, when it came time to write Over the Rainbow and the producers were saying to him, oh, we need a Home Sweet Home number, just like the one that Roger Edens wrote. Harburg recalled, he said, the picture didn't need that Home Sweet Home, God bless our home tripe. I was writing for the situation of a little girl who was desperate and had never seen anything beyond a Kansas, an arid Kansas, where there was no color in her life, there were no flowers. It was all brown and sepia, and at a moment when she was troubled in a childish way, she wanted to escape in a song of escape. Where could she go? The only colorful thing that she's ever seen in her life was the rainbow. And so it was Harburg who came up with the idea of the rainbow. There is no rainbow in the L. Frank Baum book, at least not in that part. And so the filmmakers filmed the first part of the film in black and white, or actually in sepia, and then when Dorothy lands in Kansas, you get the color. But here's the germ of the rainbow idea that Harburg was thinking about. And he became very involved in the film. The film had like 17 different scriptwriters over the course of almost a year. I mean, it was really complicated. And they came in, they came out. And Harburg became involved with the script of the film in the summer of 1938. Not just the lyrics, but the script. And he really helped to shape it. In fact, it was Harburg who wrote the scene in at the end, the libretto, not the libretto, the screenplay, when they're in the wizards, when the wizard gives them their, a medal for courage and the heart and all that. He wrote that whole thing about that you always had the possibility, you always had the heart, you always could go home, you always had the courage. That's actually Harburg's contribution, one of his contributions to the film. So you can see how he felt about that. And Harold Arlen, the composer, talks a little bit about the genesis of the song. This is a passage that is sometimes quoted. He said, we had finished most of the songs, the lemon drop songs, he would call them, but the one for Dorothy character, and I knew what I wanted. Arthur Freed, the associate producer, couldn't understand what I was worried about. And so I said to Mrs. Arlen, I said, let's go to Grauman's Chinese Theater. I said, you drive the car. I don't feel too well right now. I wasn't thinking of work. I wasn't conscious of thinking of work. I just wanted to relax. As we drove by Schwab's drugstore on Sunset Boulevard, I said, pull over, please. And she knew what I meant. And we stopped, and I really don't know why, bless the muses. I took out my little piece of manuscript and put down what you know now as Over the Rainbow. So the tune came to him. He knew the idea, the way they tended to work, Harburg and Arlen, was that Harburg would come up with an image or an idea for a song, and then Arlen would go away and compose the music. He would often lock himself in a room for days at a time for the right inspiration. Then he'd come back with a pretty completed tune, and then Harburg would fit the lyrics to it then. So, so he comes back with this tune, and Harburg says, he gave me this tune with those first two notes, dum-bum, which is an octave leap, not an easy thing to sing. And Harburg says, I tried, I'll go over the rainbow, or someday over the rainbow, or the other side of the rainbow. I had difficulty in coming to the idea of somewhere. For a while, I just thought I would leave out those first two notes. That would be a very different song, wouldn't it? It's a good thing he didn't. And so it was a long time before I came to somewhere over the rainbow. Even before the film was released, Judy Garland recorded it separately from the soundtrack for Decca with a different orchestra, and this became a big hit in the summer and fall of 1939 with Victor Young and his orchestra. She signed, she was only 16 years old, of course, she signed a contract with Decca Records, and this became a big hit, even apart from the film. Okay, where do we go? And From then on, she became strongly associated with the song, of course. It became her sort of theme song. What she said in 1961, she said, "As for my feeling toward Over the Rainbow now, it has become part of my life. It is so symbolic of everybody's dream and wish that I am sure that's why people sometimes get tears in their eyes when they hear it. I have sung it dozens of times, and it is still the song that is closest to my heart. It is very gratifying to have a song that is more or less known as my song or my theme song." And so it became for her, very much so. And even the New York Times, which is pretty straight-laced, when they wrote her obituary in 1969, they said, "Miss Garland's personal life often seemed a fruitless search for the happiness promised in Over the Rainbow." That's from the New York Times obituary. And indeed, the troubles that Judy Garland experienced over the years, substance abuse, marriage difficulties with her, the studios that she worked with, really did come to sort of, Over the Rainbow came to kind of capture those, the idea, so not so much of escape, but more the idea of sort of struggle and resolution, or dealing with your problems, and not just escaping from them. It had that aspect to it too. And she said, she was so associated with the song, once she spoke with the Queen Mother of England, and she said, "That song has plagued me through the years," Judy Garland said. "It's like being a grandmother in pigtails." You know, so she was a little ambivalent about it, because it was her theme song, and yet she was no longer the Dorothy of the pigtails. She was, I don't know whether she was a grandmother yet at this point, but so this idea of Judy Garland aging and becoming more mature and a great artist, and this song, sort of being stuck in some ways in 1939. But it wasn't, really, in a sense. And one of the most moving things is her, if you trace, I do this a bit in the book, her recordings of the song and her videos, or when she sang the song over years, and she sang it up until the last year of her life in concert, because after she broke with MGM, she made a few more films, and of course she had a big comeback with A Star is Born, the other A Star is Born from 1954, with a score by Arlen and Ira Gershwin. But she also gave many, many concert performances, and they were legendary. Some of them have been recorded, concert performances of many songs. And in one of her concerts, was a concert that she gave at the Palace Theater in the early 50s, after, again, she left MGM in 1950. She sang Over the Rainbow in an entirely different way and in a different part of the production than it was in Over the Rainbow. And this is a bit of background in that in this show that she did at the Palace Theater, the second to last number was a version of this Irving Berlin song, "We're a Couple of Swells," which she had sung in the film Easter Parade with Fred Astaire. You maybe know that famous scene where they're dressed up as hobos and "We're a couple of swells, we sleep in the best hotels," the Irving Berlin song. And so she does that number in the show from 1951, and then she comes to the front of the stage. You'll see that in the next clip, but it might start right when I click, so I'll explain it now. She's dressed up in this hobo outfit with a sort of blackened face, and the dance number ends. It's not Fred Astaire dancing with her at the Palace, it's somebody else. And she comes to the front of the stage, sits at the edge of the stage, puts her legs over the edge of the stage. The spotlight focuses on her, and she's clearly out of breath because she's just been dancing. And she sings Over the Rainbow. And I chose this one because we have a video of it, and it shows how different her interpretation became in later years, and how it, again, sort of followed her own personal life and what she felt about her personal life and what she hoped for. So this is from, I think it's 1955, actually. It was reproduced on television from the Palace Theater.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once, sing a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Pretty amazing, yes, amazing indeed. She takes the same song, and of course it's slower. She divides it. I mean, you can analyze it. I do a little bit in my book. Her vocal technique is still what it was. She was obviously tired at the end of a dancing number, but the sort of sobbing in her voice, the choke in her. I mean, and this style of performance. What you can hear some recorded studio versions where she does this in the 50s and 60s. So it really does, yeah. It completely changes the song. I mean, it's still the same song and the same singer, but 16 years later, reflecting a different stage in her life and a different stage in the evolution of the song. As I say, she kept singing it even after that. Very powerful. But that whole staging as the tramp is really quite amazing. I want to talk about another aspect that happened in the 50s and 60s, which Judy Garland and the song Over the Rainbow became connected. Judy Garland became a gay icon at the period, an icon for the gay community, and the song Over the Rainbow came to represent a lot of the aspirations and travails of that community, largely closeted still. And in reporting on this was in 2007, but this writer says, when Judy Garland sang Over the Rainbow, the sadness in her voice, even when singing about such happy images as bluebirds and lemon drops, was palpable, hinting at complex depths beyond the wholesome image projected on the screen. This was in effect the sound of the closet, and it spoke to gay men's consciousness that the image they presented in their own public lives was often at odds with the truer sense of self that mainstream society would not condone. And so this was a part of, an important part of Garland's appeal in this period. This is the very famous concert she gave at Carnegie Hall in, I think, April 1961. Became one of the biggest selling albums of all time, Judy Garland at Carnegie Hall. And she sang Over the Rainbow and other things. And I mean, I'm not saying that everybody in the front row is a gay man by any means, but there was a large, and it's been documented. There's a wonderful article by Richard Dyer about Judy Garland and gay men's consciousness, where he talked to a lot of men who heard her in the 60s and wrote about it and what she and what the song represented to them. I mean, there was much more to this concert than just that, but it's an important part of the legacy of this song and of Judy Garland. And in fact, this concert, I write about this in the book. In 2006, it was recreated by Rufus Wainwright, the whole concert, every song in the right order at Carnegie Hall. And Rufus Wainwright, an openly gay entertainer, singer, talked about how much Judy Garland meant to him, and he sings the whole concert, and including Over the Rainbow, accompanied by his mother, interestingly. The death of Judy Garland in 1969 came just a few weeks before the Stonewall riots. I don't think there's a cause and effect thing here, but there was definitely a big outpouring of emotion at Judy Garland's death among many people, including the gay community. And I've often wondered, in 1978, the gay pride flag designed by Gilbert Baker for the San Francisco Gay Pride Parade is a rainbow of colors. And Gilbert Baker died a couple of years ago, but I actually spoke to him before that, and I asked him, I got his phone number, he lived in New York, and whether he was inspired by the song Over the Rainbow. And he said no, he wasn't directly inspired by Over the Rainbow, but that he was well aware that since then the association between the song and Judy Garland and the flag has become, he said actually he was more inspired by the Rolling Stones and by the colors, by using colors to represent the colors like the pink triangle in the Nazi period had been, identify gay people. So, but that he was Gilbert Baker, the designer of the flag, was and embraced the sort of connection between the rainbow flag and the song.
I just want to.
Yeah.
She died actually just a few days before.
A few days before Stonewall.
Not months.
Sorry. Okay, it was
So
June.
It really was a triggering event.
Okay.
It's a major triggering.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I hadn't. Thank you for. No, I appreciate that.
Just piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
Some drag queens and gay men had gathered at the Stonewall Inn down off Christopher Street, and they were memorializing her. And
Already. Okay.
were sort of notorious for roughing them up or going in and making a scene, and they knew to expect it, and so they were sort of prepared. They said.
I think it was the day of the funeral.
They said if it
The day of her. Okay.
comes for us.
Oh wow. Okay. Thank you.
It was very interconnected. It wasn't
Yep.
like.
It wasn't. Okay.
Yep.
I guess I hadn't realized how interconnected it was. Yeah, John.
Well, I mean, if you look at the crowd, think of 1961, and look at that's what you said about all the men lined up at the edge of the stage.
Yeah.
Think of most concerts would be husbands and wives.
Yeah.
So it's curious that when you look at, the first time I ever saw that picture, to see like, all you see is white cops.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they're not just street guys, they're businessmen or corporate kinds of people, and there's something in that dialogue that's going on, that they're in the closet maybe, they're still there, and they can sort of idolize her as an American fan, even though
Yeah,
the things
yeah.
going on. And I think the same thing with Stonewall. I think they're all there talking about it.
Okay.
Big social event. It'll be a natural gathering place for
Well, I
discussion.
appreciate that the connection is even more direct than I knew. Thank you. And the time frame. I knew it was June 1969. I didn't have all the dates lined up exactly, but I do talk a little more about that in my book. although not the Stonewall connection, but I think that's an important part of.
And there's an interview where she's defending having a
Yes.
gay audience.
Yes, that's right. And there is a video, interview where she talks about that. Absolutely, that's correct. And there was something else I was going to say about that, but I can't remember. Yeah.
I saw a late interview with Judy Garland about these emotionally drenched late performances, and she said, quote, "I don't go out to give a performance, I go out to give blood."
Wow, I hadn't heard that. Well, yeah, these performances.
Just out of curiosity, does
Yeah.
the Rufus Wainwright concert exist? recorded
Yes, it
somewhere?
does. It was a big seller, and he recreated it 2 years ago, actually, in June of 2016. He did it again at Carnegie Hall, and I mean, I don't have time right now, but his recording of Over the Rainbow is quite amazing on that. And when he talks about, in the program booklet for that concert, he talks about how important that song was to him, Rufus Wainwright, when he was growing up. His mother, Kate McGarrigle, would play it to him all the time on the guitar. And there's actually a picture in the Carnegie Hall program booklet of her playing, or him as a kid listening, I think, to her playing. And so it really meant, yeah, it had Over the Rainbow had a special feeling. And in the original concert for 2006, she accompanies him. Not in 2016, she was dead by then, but she accompanies him. So she's on the recording for Over the Rainbow in the 2006 concert, yeah. So, yeah, wow, thank you. I mean, this is, I think, yes.
So I just want to clarify, the gay flag came out in
78.
Right?
No, 78 for the Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco. It was created by Gilbert Baker for that.
How is it connected to the Over the Rainbow song besides the name?
Well, I think it became associated with it. There wasn't a direct causal connection. And actually, if you see the film Milk, or is it Harvey Milk? When they show the footage from that, they play, Gus Van Sant played the Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow in the background with the footage of the 1978 Gay Pride Parade. I mean, so that was Gus Van.
It's like the dream come true sort of thing, right?
I guess, yeah.
And also, I was kind of out. So, what's how does facing the future have to do? What does it have to do with
Say again?
the rainbow again?
Why don't we wait for,
What does-
why don't we wait for finish your thought later?
Okay.
Well, hold that thought. Just a couple more minutes, because I want to allow some time. Maybe I'll just go through this quickly. Okay, well, another important legacy of this song, its modern incarnation, was when the Hawaiian singer Israel Kamakawiwo'ole recorded it, and it came out on this album, Facing Future, in 1993.
trouble lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to, oh why can't oh, someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dreams that you dare to, why, oh why can't
Sorry, I'm just looking at the time, and I didn't want to. You can find this. This is the biggest selling version ever of Over the Rainbow. Millions and millions. It's topped the global charts on Billboard for almost over 25 years. It's still right up there, and a lot of people actually believe that he wrote the song. If you talk to in the world today, which in a sense he does. He recreates it. The story behind that was that he went into a studio. It was recorded in 1988. He was, quite a famous singer, and he just said, "I want to." At 2 a.m., he called his producer John DeMello and said, "I would go into the studio." So they found a studio. He went in, and he did this sort of mashup of this plus "It's a Wonderful World." It's actually a medley of "It's a Wonderful World," the song associated with Louis Armstrong, and you can tell he sort of messed up the lyrics. He messes them up. Some people say they call that Israelizing a song, because he does this with most of the songs on that album. But I don't think it's inadvertent. I think it's this partly improvisational, partly. One thing that's so interesting about this phenomenon is the role of the rainbow in Hawaiian culture. So for Israel to record this song, not only was it a beautiful song and he liked it, but it really symbolized important aspects of Hawaiian self-determination and independence. The Hawaiian, the rainbow is a big symbol on Hawaii. There are these petroglyphs that are called Rainbow Man. It's on the state license plate. It was even on the football helmets. The rainbow image is big in Hawaii. There's lots of rainbows in Hawaii. And for him, Israel, and people who were into the Hawaiian independence movement, this is what the album says: "Facing backwards, I see our nation gained, our nation lost." It was a question of Hawaiian sovereignty, and so rainbow represented this kind of future, hopefully a better future for Hawaii. That this was particularly during the so-called Hawaiian Renaissance of that period, his producer said Kamakawiwo'ole was someone who had actually resided in the land of rainbows. With his version, he managed to make the song both sweeter and sadder, using it not to express longing for a paradise unseen, but for a paradise lost, or more precisely, occupied and annexed. Again, Hawaiian as an occupied and annexed territory, and Oz becoming Kansas right before his eyes. So, and most of the millions of people who listen to the song around the world don't know that connection, that it really arose from that in his, and that whole album has some songs in Hawaiian language and others, but it's become very popular. And I don't know whether we just have a couple of minutes. The song has been heard in so many places. It appears on dozens and dozens of commercials. Israel's version, Iz's version, for Norwegian insurance, for Jeremy Irons sings one commercial, or doesn't sing it, And this one I just brought, this is an Austrian sugar commercial that uses Iz's version.
Zuckerseiten Österreichs. Wiener Zucker.
The Lipizzan Stallions, yeah.
But doesn't he have to give us permission? It seems to sort of...
Oh, well, the Mountain Apple Records, yes. I mean, he died in, I guess, 98, 6, did Israel, but the Mountain Apple Records, which was his firm, is making millions and millions, licensing it all over the place. Of course, yeah, it's licensed.
It's contrary to what is...
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah. Very. Oh, you could, if you Google the various...
I saw it associated from a commercial. Never realized it was a song that was done.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been on Alaskan Air. I mean, you can hear it everywhere. It's everywhere is his version, in a way. Usually just that part, not the What a Wonderful World part. But yeah, I guess the sweetness is there. And maybe just the last thing I'll point out is his version has been used in a lot of films and television shows as well. It appeared on the show Glee, and it appears in Meet Joe Black, Finding Forrester. Quite a number of movies use Israel's version of the song. And one of the most moving comes right in the ER television series when Dr. Mark Green dies, and he's dying, and he asks his daughter to play him the song that he sang to her, a lullaby. This brings us back to, you know, some of the real feeling of the song. And it also works because he's dying in Hawaii, or I mean, dramatically, there's a more geographical connection. There but yeah, the poignancy, because that's the daughter he's been estranged from or hasn't gotten along with, and here she is at this final moment playing him the song. Judy Garland said in 1965, "It's the best song ever written. It never becomes stale because it ends with a question that keeps it from being overly sentimental. It doesn't say everything's all right. It doesn't even say everything's not all right. It just asks, why then, or why can't I?" And I think that sense of, you know, that is indeed the sense of empowerment that Dorothy feels in the movie, and that so many people who have sung it or listened to it or since then have done. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Analyzing the song.
Spend my whole life analyzing the song? I spent a part of it.
She
Oh, Judy, yes, rethinking it, yes.
At the age of 7.
As long as
Yeah.
we can hear. So
Yes,
speak
question.
loudly
Yes.
and fast.
I'm curious about the pre-recording or the pre-distribution of the song by Decca before the movie. Was that, A, was it normal for that to happen, and B, was it a promotion of the movie?
Yes, it was sort of simultaneous with the movie. But there was another story I tell in my book, which I'll tell very briefly, is that the song got out of MGM Studios somehow in the fall of 1938. Judy Garland had recorded it on the sound set, but it was in the can waiting, the scene hadn't even been filmed. And a band leader in New York named Larry Clinton got a hold of the song and recorded it with a singer named B. Wayne, sort of a good jazz singer of the day. And she does it in this really up-tempo style. She didn't know anything about, she just said it was, and RCA released this song, was going to release this song, and MGM went apoplectic and said, wait a minute, you can't do this. How did you get a hold, you have to wait until we release the film, it was months delayed. But they went ahead and released it. So this, in February 1939, you get this recording by Larry Clinton and B. Wayne, a jazz recording. And then in the summer of 1939, because the film came out right at the beginning of August, and Judy Garland recorded her album at the end of July, so it was pretty much simultaneous. And then band leaders, Glenn Miller, various people recorded it right away. Art Tatum recorded it in the summer of 1939, the jazz pianist. So. But that was part of the promotion on the part of the publishers, because the publishing arm. This is this is not that valuable, but actually these have really value if it lists the jitterbug at the bottom. The jitterbug, a song that was cut. I have a version of this that lists the jitterbug song. But anyway, this is the original sheet music cover. This was done by Al Hirschfeld. These drawings were done by an early Al Hirschfeld in 1939. And Leo Feist, which was the publishing arm of MGM. Yeah, so they put this out, but they were really upset about this Larry Clinton B. Wayne thing that was, and I actually got to interview B. Wayne. She died just a couple of years ago at age 98 or 99. And I didn't interview her directly, but through her daughter I said, what was it like to record Over the Rainbow in December 1938 when she said, I didn't know anything about Judy Garland or The Wizard of Oz. It was just a nice song that came before me and I sang it, and just another pretty song, she said. And then, of course, it became what it became. But, so yeah, they were timed, it was timed in the summer of 1939. Judy Garland's Decca recording, and then right after that, quite a number of people, band leaders, as I say, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, jazz pianists, so yeah. Yes?
Yeah, both Harburg and Harold Arlen had successful partnerships with other people, and I'm wondering how long did their partnership last?
So their partnership actually lasted a long time, right up until the 1970s, but it wasn't continuous.
Right, so you had free.
They worked mainly in the 30s, in the early, and then when Arlen began to work with Johnny Mercer in the late 30s and early 40s, producing the great Blues in the Night and things like that, it slowed down. But they came back together for a few things, including, I don't know whether you've ever seen this animated film Gay Paris that Judy Garland made about a cat. It's actually, there's some great songs in it. 1962, Harburg and Arlen worked on that, and then they did a couple of songs. They were going to revive Bloomer Girl, a musical of theirs, and they worked on that in the 1970s. So but the main part of their partnership went into the 1930s, but then occasionally thereafter too.
But they did both work with other people?
Yes, so Arlen worked.
Remember that your Harburg was blacklisted.
He was blacklisted.
But he wrote a lot of very famous.
Well, he worked with Burton Lane. This lady mentioned Finian's Rainbow. He worked with Burton Lane on that.
Didn't he write the lyrics to Brother King's Fair?
He did. That was before Jay Gorney. With Jay Gorney, that was before he started to work with Arlen. The most famous song of the Depression, "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" Oh, Harburg is a fascinating figure.
I also read that they wrote shows for the Cotton Club in Harlem.
So that was with Ted Koehler. That was his first big collaborator, Arlen. Ted Koehler, Stormy Weather, and period up until about the mid-30s. Arlen worked a lot with Ted Koehler, Stormy Weather, a lot. I Got a Right to Sing the Blues. All that period, and then Koehler. He pretty much stopped working with Koehler after that. Started working with Harburg. It's not exactly chronological. Then Ira Gershwin. Oh, he worked with Ira Gershwin a little bit, and then he came back to work with Ira Gershwin on A Star Is Born, and there were a few collaborators. Just one quick story, and then I should answer that gentleman's question. I tried to interview the last two surviving lyricists that worked with Arlen. I missed one, Dory Langen, who was Andre Previn's ex-wife, who died just before I reached her. Could try to reach her a couple of years ago. But Martin Charnin, the guy who wrote Annie, worked with Arlen in the 1960s. They were brought together. Somebody thought that Arlen, was feeling a little depressed about the state of musicals and stuff. And so Martin Charnin was brought together with Arlen. They worked together on a musical, produced tons of songs for a musical called, it'll come to me, that was never produced, based on a, it's funny that I can't think of the name, but well, I'll just tell one quick anecdote about that. So Martin Charnin told me what it was like to work with Arlen. Of course, he was younger, and he was really in awe of Arlen's, talent and stuff. And he said Arlen would write these complex tunes, and then he called him a spaghetti writer, because Arlen's tunes often go beyond the normal. You think of something like Blues in the Night or The Man That Got Away. These are tunes that go 70, 80 bars. That Old Black Magic. Arlen called them tapeworm songs. They just or One for My Baby, One for the Road. These are like mini cantatas or something like that. And so and so Charnin said, well, I just went with it. I couldn't make him confine it into 32 bars. I have another anecdote, but I won't tell it. This gentleman, yeah.
Is it commonly known the origin of the word Oz? And secondly, on the subject of the fate of Toto, I worked for Mervyn LeRoy's son, Warner LeRoy, who inherited Toto, and said to be the nastiest little terrier. And I don't know if Toto arrived nasty. I can tell you Warner LeRoy was what the English call a nasty piece of business. I don't know if they made him nasty. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I mean, there probably is. I mean, the Wizard of Oz has been so carefully documented. Weren't there a couple of Totos? Or maybe I'm making that up.
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a preamble. I don't know what happened to Toto, but interestingly enough, so at the Newberry Library, because Lyman Frank and his wife lived in Lincoln Park. They moved to Chicago, which is where he wrote the first in the 14-book series, and they have a wonderful collection at the Newberry Library in Chicago. When it was first staged at the Opera House in Chicago in '03, before it came to New York, there was no Toto. There was a cow. And the cow's name was Imogene. So Dorothy goes on this journey with, and I just think that's a fun fact. Because they couldn't train. I mean, when you think about the staging, you can't train a terrier to do that.
So I'm not sure about. Well, I forget what the other part of your question was.
The origin of the word Oz.
I don't remember.
I worked in a gallery. We sold Bond's papers, and he made these stories for his children originally.
Right.
And they would sit on the floor of his library as he told them. After a lot of times hearing them, his daughter said, "What's the name of this magical place?" And he looked around his library looking for ideas and clues, and he had a 3-drawer file box, and he opened the bottom drawer, which was O to Z. And this is the magical word of Oz.
Has that been, that sounds plausible to me. Has that been documented somewhere? Yeah, okay, that's great to know that, yeah. Yes.
Ernest M. Harburg, where did the yip come from?
Let's see, Ernest Yipsel. Yipsel was his middle name. Yipsel, I think, right? Yeah, Yipsel. So they call Edgar Yipsel Harburg, I think.
E.Y. Harburg?
E.Y. Harburg, yeah. And so the Yipper, or Yip, and Arlen will often call him the Yipper. Oh, Ernie is his son, Ernie Harburg, who's still with us. Yes, he is, Ernie Harburg.
He lives in New York.
Yes, he does, and he runs the Harburg Foundation. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
There's a radio personality who uses the Israel version. Art Bernard.
Okay. As a kind of theme song, or?
Well, we used to be towards the end of the program was on from 1 a.m. to It's called Coast to Coast. And also, could we consider the Leonard Bernstein Stephen Sondheim song "Somewhere," a derivative of Over the Rainbow?
That's interesting. Of course, it's a seventh instead of an octave, but hey, I mean, I don't know about a derivative, but it, yeah, the sense of trying to escape or longing, yeah, there's a place for us. Yeah, actually, I think that makes sense. It fits, yeah. And of course, Sondheim and Bernstein would both have known that show. Yes?
Getting back to the question about Toto, the gentleman dog. Actually, Toto, even though he's a male character in The Wizard of Oz, it was a female dog. Actually, Toto.
Oh, okay.
And she was very cantankerous and had a problem with the trainers, but she actually went on to make like 125 movies. And she got paid as much as
she got more money than the Munchkins. That's really been documented now, how badly the Munchkins were treated.
Karen Terrier, by the way.
But you read about the dog?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
We love animals.
Yes. Yes.
I was fascinated by the name of the chair that you...
Oh, my chair at
Would you like to tell us about Harry von Tilzer?
Harry von Tilzer and Albert von... One of the brothers was a graduate of the Columbia Law School, and I think that's how the money came to Columbia. So, Harry and Albert von Tilzer, Tin Pan Alley composers and publishers, didn't have a direct connection with Columbia, but as far as I understand it, one of their brothers did.
Well, I think it was after the ball.
Yeah, one of my friends calls me the Cracker Jack professor.
The original name for the whole family was Gumm, right?
Gumm,
And they
Gumm.
changed their
Not
name
related,
on Tilzer.
right? Not related to the Judy Garland Gums, I don't think. But
And they had music published. They did.
yes, yes,
And one of them was a composer, right?
yes. I think Harry was the, yeah, take me out to the ball game, and yeah.
Just I have to interject
Yeah.
on a related note
Yes, that's
to
right.
after the ball and to take me out to the ball
Yeah.
game. Just yesterday, the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission scheduled a hearing to create a Tin Pan Alley Historic District on 28th Street between 6th Avenue. So if you could look up there's AM New York. It's on the front cover.
Yeah, this is
of
very
AM
exciting,
New York.
very historic. Yeah.
And John Reddick was very instrumental in working with me and a number of other people over a period of years to create that. And Walter wrote a lovely letter to the commission, so it's a group love fest. So look for a Tin Pan, go to the Tin Pan Alley Historic District on 28th Street between Broadway and 6th.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Just before we stop, what led you to this song? The music that you were specializing in
It was very different, yeah. Well, I grew up in New York City, always loving, popular song, Tin Pan Alley, going to musical theater. My parents and grandparents took me to see shows, in the late 50s and early 60s. So I always loved the repertory of, Broadway musicals and that, and Hollywood musicals. But when I was coming up, so to speak, as a musicologist, nobody would study this stuff. If you thought you wanted to write on Hollywood or Broadway in historical musicology, that was beneath. But that's really changed in the last 20 or 30 years. There's a lot of great work on interest in composers like, not so much in Arlen, but of course Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, lots of Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, scholars working with the materials and analyzing the shows, and Freddie Mercury, yes. But my own interest is that I really fell in love with the music of Harold Arlen at a certain point. I'd always known some of the big songs, and this may be more than you want to know, but there's a wonderful book, very idiosyncratic, called American Popular Song by Alec Wilder. Alec Wilder himself was a composer and a critic, and Alec Wilder in the early 70s wrote this book called American Popular Song, The Great Innovators. It's an amazing book, very kind of opinionated in this, but he has a whole chapter on Harold Arlen, and he just absolutely worships the music of Harold Arlen. In fact, he says, I really have to say I place it, I'll be criticized for this, but I place it above the music of George Gershwin. He says, I admire Gershwin, but I envy Arlen, says Alec Wilder. And so this chapter has all the stuff on the song. I thought, wow, you know, so I started listening to it more and more, and then I realized how many people, you know, he's sort of a composer's composer in a way, but I mean, Sondheim worships Harold Arlen. He said, in fact, Sondheim says that every show of his has an Arlen song in it. You have to guess which one. Maybe that one, yes. Or in Follies. I mean, he loves Arlen, and a great maestro who just died, Andre Previn. I once interviewed him about Harold Arlen. Andre Previn made 4 or 5 different albums of Harold Arlen's music, including a great jazz solo album, a vocal album. Yeah, so I mean, it's partly that. So that's sort of what led me to want to look more at his music, and then, of course, it leads you to Over the Rainbow, and then the interesting story of, you know, the film. And but as I say, I'd like to write more. Just, you know, I mean, he had the career that spanned from the late 20s to the mid-60s. Plus, he's a really great pianist and singer. And Arlen himself made a number of recordings. Terrific performer of his own music, and that's an important part of his legacy, which isn't. There's like 3 major songwriter composers. This is in the era before Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and stuff. That would be Hoagy Carmichael, Johnny Mercer, and Harold Arlen. In a book Will Friedwald writes about American popular song, or singers, those are the 3 he identifies, and he has chapters, little chapters on each of those. Hoagy Carmichael, who also played and sang, Harold Arlen, and Johnny Mercer as well. So, yeah, Arlen has a lot of aspects to his legacy that fascinate me. Yeah.
There are recordings.
Yes, there are.
That are accessible. I mean,
yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, he made. Well, very early on, he actually started out as a singer. He made these and a pianist before he was even composing. So he fronted for some bands, Arnold Johnson, and you can find some of those with this very high, light tenor voice. Arlen singing not only his own music but other people's music, and then he had his own jazz band that he played piano for. And then he got the big break to write the song "Get Happy," and then, you know, everything started with the song "Get Happy" that he wrote with Ted Koehler, and. Yeah, but then later on, in the 50s, he made 2 big albums with Capitol Records. And then he made an album with Barbra Streisand, who he really liked, called Harold Arlen Sings with Friend. I think you can probably find those on YouTube. And Barbra Streisand, who loved, actually, an Arlen song made her career. "Asleep in B" was the first song that...
House of Flowers.
House of Flowers, yeah, but... this you can find on YouTube. Barbra Streisand at age 19 going on the Johnny Carson show and singing Harold Arlen's "Asleep in B." That's just really amazing. And she loved to sing his music. And in fact, if you look at her first album, Barbara Sings, or the Barbara album, the back cover is not a program note. It's a big encomium from Harold Arlen, the whole back cover. You know, this, watch out for this, you know, listen to this singer, you know, Harold Arlen on the back of... So yeah, I mean, he worked with performers and was a performer himself. It's a multifaceted career. So interesting, yeah. Sorry, too many anecdotes.
People who are residents here at Morningside Gardens, we're putting Professor Frisch's book in your lending library, and we're also putting the book that some Frisch wrote about in your lending.
Definitely worth reading. It's very short, but very, very personal and fascinating, but some of the best writing on The Wizard of Oz.
And reading the 2 together, reading the 2 books together is fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.